Greetings, friends around the world. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel. Are statements and actions by the Trump administration pushing the European Union to be closer together with Russia? I saw an article this week. It was titled, "Is Trump Pushing Germany and Russia Together?" The article starts off by talking about the fact that Vladimir Putin had just been to Germany and Austria. He called this a charm offensive, and he met with people including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And the article says this seems to be a shift of relationship to make a more close relationship between Germany and Russia. And the article says, well, why? So let me read the answer from the article. The obvious answer is necessity, brought about by pressure being placed on both countries by Donald Trump through sanctions and tariffs and their shared interests represented by the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this is a pipeline to provide energy from Russia into Germany. U.S. President Donald Trump objected to this, said that this means that Germany will allow themselves to be controlled by Russia, more so than they already have been, and he made all kinds of comments about there that upset and offended the Europeans. Well, the article says, by driving a wedge between Germany and the U.S. over NATO and attacking the foundations of German economy, Trump is ensuring the current rapprochement between Germany and Russia. Is that what Trump is doing, the article is saying? Well, it appears to be certainly something along that line happening. Now, there's some other things going on. I looked at a couple other things that were out this week. And one is, because of sanctions against Russia, Russia's taking some other steps. I'm going to read something from Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov. And he wrote, "The time has come when we need to go from words to actions and get rid of the dollar," meaning the US dollar, "as a means of mutual settlements and look for alternatives." Now I'd like to read something from Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak. He said, "There's a common understanding that we need to move towards the use of national currencies in our settlement. There is a need for this as well as the wish of the parties." By national currencies, what he's saying is something other than the US dollar, which is often used as the trading currency between nations. And I want to read something else that is related to this. It says, "We are considering an option of payment in national currencies with them. This requires certain adjustments of financial, economic, and banking sectors to accomplish this." Now, they're concerned about trade with Turkey, which the United States has recently imposed most sanctions on, Iran, etc. You say, well, that's just Russia, so who cares? Well, Germany's foreign minister, Heiko Maas, called for a new payment system. So let me read something that he had said or wrote. "Europe should not allow the U.S. to act over our heads and at our expense. For that reason, it's essential that we strengthen European autonomy by establishing payment channels that are independent of the U.S., creating a European monetary fund, and building up an independent SWIFT system." Now, the SWIFT system is an international payment system that the United States dominates and controls. And other nations have been concerned about this. As a matter of fact, the Russians developed a system called MIR, which is essentially a way to get around the SWIFT system in order to do trades of bank wires and that type of stuff. Basically, as one article says, it's just software, so this is something that can be done. Furthermore, I'd like to read something else from Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, again the German Foreign Minister. "Every day the agreement," meaning the Iran agreement, "continues to exist is better than the highly explosive crisis that otherwise threatens the Middle East." Basically, he said, and it says an unspoken message in this news article, Europe no longer wants to be a vassal state, the United States, monopoly over global payments, etc. So this is a concern that they want to bypass the US dollar. And that's actually one of the reasons why the euro was developed in the first place. Now, Heiko Maas made a few other comments. By the way, he wants Europe to be united. And he is upset, basically. Let me read this from another news article. Trump's attacks says he sees the EU as a stronghold of rule-based order, one that abides by accords such as the Paris Climate Agreement, the WTO, World Trade Organization, rules, and UN resolutions. With the U.S. increasingly unavailable as a reliable partner, Moss wants to work more closely with like-minded countries who have overlapping values. But that include Russia. Well, Russia supports the Paris Climate Agreement. They're also unhappy with U.S. trade policies and WTO policies, and it supports the Iran deal, all of which the Germans and Europeans do this. Donald Trump is accelerating the separation of Europe from the United States while also pushing Europeans to be closer to Russia. I'd like to read a couple of things from German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Good and close collaboration between Russia and Germany is very important, he said. And this article said, by the way, he said this in counterpoint to being associated with Britain. Okay, so this is a German president says, instead of being close to the Brits, we need to be closer to Russia. Now, he was also the first Western leader to congratulate Vladimir Putin on his re-election. So let me read what he said there. Bilateral relations between our countries have traditionally been close, relying on a solid foundation. We have always seen close cooperation between Russia and Germany, an important pillar for common European efforts to establish and strengthen a long common world order on our continent. He hopes and wishes that we'll be able to counter alienation on our continent. So this is a concern to actually push against the Brits, by the way, but also the United States at the same time. Now, Germany has long wanted to cooperate with Russia. In 2015, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the European Union was open to trade talks with the newly developed or the newly started Eurasian Union, which is a Russian-dominated organization. Now, as far as Russia goes, I found an article that says President Putin, basing his argument on common membership of the WTO, has contended that both the EU, that's the European Union, and the EAEU, the Eurasian Economic Union, would be able to forge a wider pan-European association of mutual advantage. And as his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said, we must work for a union of unions, an alliance of the EU and the Eurasian Union. So Russia is quite willing to cooperate with Germany and the rest of Europe against the United States and USA. Now, this has been my view for a long time. A couple of years after I started to write about this, or some years after I started to write about it, I found something from the old Radio Church of God related to this from 1962. And though I hadn't read it to get my ideas, I ran this article just about 2 years ago, so I hadn't read it before. So anyway, we read something from March 1962 from the old Radio Church of God. Germany, those living in Germany, even the German government, may not yet know that they are going to join in a treaty with the Russians to destroy the United States and bring it to its knees. It is not in his heart to think so, but on the other hand, it is in his heart to destroy the very characteristic of the Assyrian, the modern German, is a harsh, cruel, iron dedication to militarism and destruction. Well, in this particular article, that's a reference to Isaiah chapter 10, which I'm not going to go into now, but notice again, over 56 years ago, the Radio Church of God said there's going to be some kind of alliance between Russia and Germany, which will result in the United States being destroyed. And that is the case. Now, while Russia is not the king of the North, and some Protestants properly believe that it is, the Europeans are the king of the North. And you can base that upon a variety of things in the Old Testament and the New Testament. As a matter of fact, we have another Bible News Prophecy video called Can You Prove the Beast to Come is European? And it explains from both the Old and the New Testament why the beast to come is a European beast and the king of the North is a European as opposed to the Russians. But it doesn't mean the Russians won't cooperate. Now, as the Russians will cooperate with the Europeans will cooperate with the Russians too, as I've mentioned already today. Anyway, I'd like to read just one prophecy. This is from the book of Daniel, Daniel 11, verse 39. I'm going to read this from the New King James Version of the Bible. It talks about a he who is the king of the north. So Daniel 11, verse 39. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many and divide the land for gain. Now this is a prophecy of the king of the north, his European power. He's going to act against the strongest fortresses, the strongest military. That would be the United States. He's going to win, according to this, and he's going to divide the land for gain. It's been my contention for a long time, probably from last decade, I think, that when the king of the north does this, he will provide some land to Russia. What do you mean land? Yeah, land like Alaska. Some or all of it, perhaps. Maybe parts of Canada as well. Now, Russia has long had interest in getting Alaska back. Oh yes, it sold it to the United States in the 1800s. But back in the 20th century, Joseph Stalin had hoped to invade Alaska. And in the 21st century, a Russian academic by the name of Igor Pinari claimed that Russia would end up with Alaska when the United States was divided. Now, he didn't base this on biblical prophecy as far as I can tell. Now, the Bible is clear that Russia will be a significant military power in the end and cause fear. You can read about that in Daniel 11, 44 to 45. But there's going to be temporary cooperation between the Europeans and Russia. It includes the Germans, of course. And this is not going to end well for the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and even ultimately Australia and New Zealand. Bible prophecy shows that the current world order, dominated by the Anglo-American peoples, is not going to continue. We're seeing more cooperation between the Europeans and Russia. And how it's going to end up will be not what people in the United States think is going to happen. There are many unintended consequences of President Trump's actions, statements, etc., and bringing or pushing the Europeans closer to the Russians is going to be one of those, and it will not end well for the United States or its Anglo-Saxon descended allies. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel.